cutting your illustration board. So we will be using what's called illustration board. Well, you have some options, and I spoke about those in the materials videos. There's watercolor blocks, there's heavier duty watercolor paper, but there's also illustration board, and you can get Canson or Crescent. This is a hot press, so it has a smooth surface to it. But you can also get a cold press. It's really kind of nice with gouache. I kind of wish I had a cold press here because it would be has a little bit of texture, which can make edges nice. Where it makes edges a little softer in places, so it can be nice to work with. So this is a great option. They come in, larger sizes. This is probably one of the smaller sizes you can get it in, which is a 20 by 30. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting one or two of these boards, depending on how much landscape painting you want to do, into smaller pieces. Okay, so pieces like this. This is the Crescent brand, and you can get pieces that are a 6 by 8 inch or 8 by 10. And actually I found that on this 20 by 30, a 7 by 10, which is, they make a watercolor paper that size too. A 7-inch by 10-inch gets a full eight pieces out of one board. And so I'm starting to measure for the 7 by 10 size illustration board. So really important is that you have a nice stable surface, a table to work on. You have a utility blade, a pencil, sharp pencil, and some sort of a ruler. And you can use a smaller ruler, but you just have to make as you're measuring, you'd have to make more marks so you could move the ruler across. So that would be a possibility. But the surface needs to be stable. I have these cutting mats, I have them. If you don't have them, you can put like a couple pieces of cardboard below it, something that, but you don't want to cut directly on a tabletop because your knife will go through, obviously, and cut and score and mess up the table. So put something flat below it that you don't mind ruining, that you can use as kind of a little barrier. And we want to be really careful when you're doing things like making your measurements. So you definitely do not want to, I'm going to do my 7-inch measurements here. You don't want to rush it. This is a part of the craft of doing anything, and in this case we're making paintings, but you want to take time and care with it. When I was a student, I probably didn't do that quite as much, but I kind of regret it because when things need to be presented, if you did do a nice piece, you might have made a mess of it. It might be cut off kilter, and you've got to try to fix it. So my advice to you is to do it right the first time and take some time. And you're just going to steady. If you have a nice long ruler, it's, like I said, it's easier, but you're just going to mark it out. Now there is an app called Die Cut. It's a nice app, and it will, if you plug it, it gives you an option to put the large format you're cutting into, and then you can tell it the sizes you want to cut. Like I want to cut a 7 by 10, and it'll show you all the different formattings and how many pieces you can get perfectly. It's an app that a lot of printmakers I know use. It's probably useful for many things, but it's a great app, and I use it all the time. And so that's one that's free and very useful. The biggest thing about this process, and I'll wrap it up pretty quickly here, is we want to have clean cuts. We want to have uniform sizes, and we don't want to cut ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And I just have to do the cross. So make sure we do good measurements. Now we're just going to go down to 10. And this one goes straight to 20, so we'll do a 10 here. Do a 10 here. Move that across, and then that'll be my grid to cut with, and I'll do a couple cuts, and then I'll wrap this up. You want to slide it up to that little mark you made, slide it right up to that. This is kind of obvious, I know, I get it. But you really need to take time with this and do it right, even though. And my table's kind of off kilter here a little bit because I have two tables joined. Okay. So there's my 8 pieces. Probably the easiest thing to do, I'm not going to do it because of my angle here and the way the camera's set up, but I'll just make a couple cuts to show you. You want to slide this straight edge right up to that line so that you can barely see that line and kind of work it up there. And once you get it on there, put some pressure on it with your hand, okay? Get it stabilized. Open up your knife, your utility knife, your X-Acto blade, whatever, secure it, make sure the blade is sharp. If it's not, you can break these blades off. Usually they have a breaking point. You can push it up to the breaking point and snap them. Be careful when you do that. I usually put something over the top, like a piece of cardboard or something, so it doesn't flip up at me. But what we want to do is keep nice even pressure, flat surface, cutting mat underneath, and you're going to put it right at the top, and you're not going to put pressure against it. You're just going to draw it straight back just straight back, easy. You don't want a ton of pressure. You don't want to go fast. Just draw it nice and even all the way back through, and you're not going to cut through it the first time. A sharp blade is really, really helpful because it'll go through these things way easier. A dull blade is actually easier to cut yourself with, surprisingly, but it's because a dull blade doesn't slide through the paper smoothly and it can catch it in funny ways. Okay, so you want to score it a couple times, usually once or twice, and usually on the second or third time. Sometimes you need to work. Let's see, my cut went off. I need to move my hand down and work my way down here. One more. Okay. This one's taking a little bit more to cut. So I'm gonna break this blade. Let me get a sharper blade. I'll show you how I do it. There's the blade. There's the breaking point on it. You can kind of see it. I just move the blade up. I'm gonna put this over and just push against it. There it is. Pull it up for a sharper one. And now this should cut a lot easier going through here, because I shouldn't have to go through it 3 times. The last illustration board I did was really quite easy. This one's trickier. Not sure why. I'll do one more cut here. Maybe this will be better. I think the table might have been kind of buckling while I was doing that. In any case, draw it straight back. See how I'm working my hand back as I go a little bit too? It's good. Nice and even. But this is also a different brand. This is the Canson. It might be a little more dense than that Crescent. That Crescent, I went through it pretty easily. But this Canson's taking a little more. I can feel it's taking more to get through it. And my ruler slipped there. There we go. And then obviously, I would do the whole thing. It would have been better if I would have done the long cut first and went all the way down the middle, because I would probably, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter that much. Draw it back kind of away from you as you draw. You don't pull right towards yourself, and make sure you're on a flat surface. Really important. So really nice sizes to work with. I'm gonna get 8 of those. Plus I got another 8 or so on another board. There's plenty to do when we're in Italy with these little illustration boards to work with. So just a little recap. I already showed you how to cut them, but I want to show you how I know that I already kind of went over this in the other materials video, and hopefully you got it. I like to have a small, thin, kind of rigid surface. It can be a piece of plywood. Don't get anything thick and heavy. And just something I can put the illustration board on. So this is my 8 by 10 illustration board. And what I would do is simply get a clip, a couple pieces of tape maybe. This is pretty rigid, so the clip would work. Sometimes I could take and put a little scrap sheet of board. This is a little big. I could take a smaller scrap sheet, put it down here underneath, and clip it to the side here and use it as a sort of test my color out here. Or a piece of paper would work too. I could slide that in or behind, and I can be testing my colors down here, and I could paint on this. When I get to the top, I can just simply move the clip and paint over that. Or you can tape it, however you want. But I like to have a board, something like this, to work on. The other alternatives, and you could put it on an easel too. This will work. If you had a super cheap, I put a cheap like $16 portable easel. It is cheap, but it'll work if you want something really lightweight. It'll fit in your suitcase. And you can just prop this on an easel, sit on the ground or sit on a bench or bring a little portable chair, whatever you like. This is a nice way to paint landscape outdoors. It's simple. It's pretty cheap, pretty simple. And you could even use a thick piece of cardboard if you needed to, like a real thick, heavier duty piece of like chipboard, pressed cardboard, not the corrugated kind. The other thing you could do is use watercolor paper. This is a 140-pound watercolor paper. It'll tend to, if you tape it, it'll probably help it out a little bit. You're supposed to stretch these, wet them down, stretch them with with a tape that you wet, and you glue it to a surface so that it stretches nice and tight. But you can paint on a 140-pound piece of paper like this. It'll curl a little bit as if it gets really wet, which is, a little bit irritating because the water will pool, but it's doable. So this is a doable option, is just to get some heavier weight watercolor paper, clip it down as well. And then the other option would be like a watercolor block of some sort. And then they make like multimedia papers as well. So you could even get a sketchbook of it's a heavier stock multimedia paper. I think Canson has a sketch pad of that. And that's another way to go too. You can just keep it kind of simple and go that way as well too. So if you don't want to do all this cutting and illustration board stuff, there is that Canson multimedia, I think it's like a notebook or pad, multimedia pad that you could buy. And it's used for wet or dry media, and it's pretty durable. So it's another way to go. Anyway, this is kind of how the setup with the paper would be.